A reformist candidate won Iran's presidential election, filling the seat left vacant by the sudden passing of President Ebrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash in May. What does the victory of Masoud Pezeshkian in the runoffs indicate for the country and the wider region? With a reformist beating a hardline conservative, could Iran witness a softening of its foreign policy? For further insights, we're now joined by Professor Kim Byung-joo. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
He's a 69-year-old cardiac surgeon, securing over 16 million votes, outdoing his hardline rival by roughly 3 million votes. What should we at this point understand and know about the new Iranian president-elect, reformist candidate Masoud Pezeshkian?
Right, you mentioned 69-year-old, the oldest actually president-elect in Iran's history, and you also mentioned cardiac surgeon. So a very interesting background, if you will. With that background, we know that he was active in Iran-Iraq war during the 1980s as a medical team on the front lines. That's also unique very much. And he served as a county governor, elected county governor of the West Azerbaijan province during that time of Iran-Iraq war, and at the same time when he was active on the front lines. I mentioned the West Azerbaijan province, and what that means is he's from that province, and ethnically speaking, therefore he's kind of minority. He's half Azerbaijani, together with Iranian Kurd on her mom's side and Azerbaijani on his father's side. So he's an ethnic minority, and as a result of it, we hear reports that he got considerable support from the ethnic minorities as well. So on top of it, not only as a county governor, but also physician on the front lines, he also later on moved up the ladder and served as Iran's, the whole nation, Iran's Minister of Health and Medical Education, and for a few years. So he was at a ministerial level. And at the same time, he was serving, according to the reports, 5 terms as a member of parliament. He moved up all the way to the position of first deputy speaker of the parliament, 2016, and he served there for 4 years. So coming from the province, working as a cardiac surgeon on the war front lines, he served the provincial government, but nationally, and he also worked as the national government as a minister and then member of parliament. So kind of wide scope of public service, career altogether. And he ran for presidency about 10 years ago, 2013. He ran, but he withdrew at the end. And then 2021, last election, he ran for presidency again. But at that time, he was not approved by the top leadership. In Iran, the system of theocracy, religious leaders rule the country. And interesting thing is, presidential candidates, they have to be approved by the top religious leadership.
The supreme leader.
Yes. And 2021, he was not approved, so he could not run. He was trying to run, but he could not run.
Okay.
This time, it looks like he got about 54% of the votes as opposed to like 45 of his opponents. So considerable amount of support coming from the people altogether. And one of the things that you have already mentioned is that he supports the restoration of JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that was signed back in, I remember, 2015 with the United States, China, Russia, and Western European countries, all participating in order to slow down and control Iran's nuclear development program. And he supports the restoration of it. And also, he supports overall kind of liberalization measures of the society coming, coming in the aftermath of 2022 uprising, the popular uprising, protesting against the government. So that much we know so far.
Maybe it's also worth mentioning to our listeners that the first round of voting did, in fact, have a record low turnout. Many Iranians actually boycotted it in protest. But this whole prospect of a hardline administration actually encouraged voters to hit the polls. And it's reflected in this newly elected president. So can you elaborate further? What does a victory of a reformist candidate signify for the country and perhaps its foreign policies to consider? We'll get to.
Right. Your mentioning of the boycott, I think, is very important because that largely reflects the popular sentiment, still considerably higher level of dissatisfaction with the current government and the political system on the part of the people. And that resulted in considerable boycott during the last general election as well as the first round of presidential election. So we sense that. And people's final choice here of this new president-elect shows that people want certain change. Overall, it was three years ago when the previous liberal, progressive, relatively speaking, progressive president stepped down, Hassan Rouhani. And since then, we had the previous conservative president. And during that time, we had the popular uprising and all that. So this kind of new, this political situation I just mentioned kind of changes overall landscape of Iran, because before then, what we saw was in Iran where they have 4-year renewable presidential term. Usually what we have seen is every 8 years, we would see a conservative presidency in place, and then followed by progressive, more liberal presidency replacing it, and then vice versa. Almost eight years every time these change has been happening. But this time, it's only about 3 years, and during the past 3 years, we had that turmoil. So we can see what's coming up here. And the new president-elect himself, of course, he has promised overall some new, different kind of progress on the domestic and social policies altogether. Even though he talked about, JCPOA restoration and stuff, there's a certain limit on the foreign policy side, but on the on the social side and domestic side, there could be certain changes that could be coming up, particularly because of the people's dissatisfaction with the current system altogether here. And so overall, what we are seeing is this new president-elect, Pezeshkian, is talking about the kind of relaxation of the crackdown on, for example, they have a unit called moral police or guidance police, right? And those police can kind of like crack down on women's
attire and how they carry themselves, right?
Attire. Right. Right. And that had been one of the key focus of the uprising last time. So we could perhaps expect certain change on the way that kind of a police or social kind of oppression may be relaxed a little bit. And also overall, the women's status altogether. Pezeshkian was talking about it is not acceptable to have women as a second-rate citizen, only committed for the maintenance of family affairs. That's not acceptable. That needs to be changed. And he said overall, in various social measures and so on, he has promised kind of taking step back from the previous president who was killed in the helicopter accident, in previous month. He was promising that certain changes in terms of the social control measures, at least. So that far we know. And so, as I mentioned again, instead of the actions outside, the more of the actions inside, that's where we could see more, changes, if you will.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But as you've alluded to earlier, Professor Kim, Iran's supreme leader does in fact wield the most power in government. But some analysts say the incoming president would set domestic policies and shape foreign policy direction. So to what extent does Pezeshkian's victory mean a new direction for Iran or a new chapter for Iran?
Yeah, international community, despite this observation I just shared with you, within the international community, still there are certain expectations about Iran changing outside. To talk about that, we have to mention what you already have mentioned. Overall, their political structure that is the top leadership in this system of theocracy. Supreme leader kind of monopolizes kind of power over making decisions on national survival, if that's the proper way of saying it, I'm not sure. But what I mean is the defense, the national security, and foreign policy. Those are the top areas where the supreme leader actually kind of monopolizes the control over. So that's why it's very difficult in terms of difficult to expect Iran's change of stance towards, for instance, toward Israel and towards a different kind of like a nuclear development programs and multilateral actions and economic sanctions measures that's imposed upon Iran, what Iran can do in response to relax those sanctions. Overall, they're saying in this country where this senior leadership, religious leadership controls everything, it's going to be difficult. So that's why they're saying most of the changes resulting from the new president-elect would be rather limited, domestic, in the domestic scope. And because, resistance from the judiciary, the military, high level of government officials, as well as the parliament, here is a long list of entities that could actually stage or pause reactions on resistance against the new president-elect's measures of changing Iran's stance outside. And also, one thing really interesting that's obvious but interesting to be reminded of is, no matter what Iran does about JCPOA, the nuclear agreement, America, the United States, is affected, right? And Donald Trump is the one who actually trashed the agreement. It was not Iran. Iran signed the agreement with Obama government, but Donald Trump trashed the agreement, canceled it, and destroyed it. So basically, the November election coming up inside the United States, it's very difficult for Iran to take any actions, because if Trump comes in, the same thing will be repeated no matter what Iran tries this time. So there is that dilemma and headache.
All right. So much is dependent on the outcome of the November election. It seems like we're holding our breath for that. Also turning to Iran's tension with Israel next, what are the key points we see in the ways Israel is dealing with Hezbollah?
Hezbollah, as we know, is a political military group of Lebanon, and this group was created as a result of Israel's invasion of Lebanon several decades ago. And so Hezbollah stands there as one of the two major political military groups in the region, together with Hamas. Hamas is a Sunni group inside Palestine region, and Hezbollah is a Shia group inside Lebanon, but they're kind of closely cooperating together. And they say Iran is behind Hezbollah because Iran Shia, Hezbollah Shia, they work together, and Iran is a big supporter of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has been, as I said, supporting Hamas here all together. So what's been happening is Hezbollah inside Lebanon means they're located in the north of Israel, while Hamas is more like a southwest of Israel. And while this Gaza war in Gaza was continuing on, Iran facing Hamas in the southwest of Israel, in the northern, border, there has been troubles. Hezbollah has not been keeping quiet since last October, and they have been waging military actions against Israel. And so what's been happening is Israel has been responding to Hezbollah in the north, and as a result of it, they had to withdraw a lot of residents, Israeli residents living near the border of northern Israel. And so, interestingly, Israeli citizens became refugees, which is very rare occasion. Israel has created large population of refugees in Gaza and elsewhere in Lebanon through their military actions. But this time, as a result of Hezbollah military actions in the north, Israel had to face this situation of refugees being created and rockets flying and drones like flying over in the north. So there has been limited war in the north. And now the concern is whether this confrontation is going to be expanding. Israel's side has said, now the war in Gaza is kind of under control, and now we are going to look to north. And Netanyahu has said they are ready to move their troops to the north and face Hezbollah big time in the north. So there has been a growing concern altogether what this would mean. Because if Israel confronts Hezbollah on the full scale, they will have to actually hit inside Lebanon, and even in order to cut off the supply chains in the north, Israel may have to bomb kind of Syria, Iraq, and even Iran in a full-scale war. So that's a very scary scenario, and everyone is afraid of that.
And it's a wider conflict that all the involved parties would want to avoid at all costs. Some reports say leaders of Hezbollah and Hamas are discussing a ceasefire in Gaza. Can we see this as the efforts of Hezbollah and Iran to avoid escalation with Israel? So efforts to avoid a wider conflict.
There are those people who are looking for some hopeful signs and kind of a positive outcome out of this, avoiding such confrontation. But they saw last Friday Syed Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader of Hezbollah, and Khalil al-Hayya, the leader of Hamas, getting together, going over different ideas of ceasefire and restoring peace in Gaza area. And a lot of people saw that as a possible step to try to avoid this kind of military escalation. We'll have to wait and see on this one. Things are pretty unclear at the moment. But what we know altogether is that if Israel's escalation with Hezbollah goes into full scale, the world will face a oil price skyrocketing. Some people say oil price going over $90 per barrel, while before all this Hezbollah was emerging, they were saying that next year the oil price will be stabilized, but that wishful thinking or hopeful prediction is going to be turned upside down, and we are going to see a huge turmoil in the world oil market as one consequence. So that's what the world is bracing for at the moment.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for your insights. Have a safe week. We'll speak to you again next week.
Thank you very much.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.